Depending on where you fall in that aisle, way over here being it's totally nefarious, and maybe way over here where it's accidental or unintentional. I don't buy the accidental, unintentional part of it. I'm somewhere in the middle. I believe that there are those factions that at a minimum take pleasure in the decimation. I believe that no matter where you fall on that aisle of discussion, the reality net worth is the same. It is happening.
Welcome to this episode of the Sharpening Report. I'm your host, Sam Johnston. Where you find on YouTube, iTunes, Blog Talk, and you can find me on Twitter at Sam T. Johnston. This is part 2 of a conversation I had with Joe Horn in regards to his new book called Timebomb. This episode, whereas last episode we got all into his personal life, where he comes from, the struggle that he had, which I think a lot of people can relate to, so definitely go listen to that part first. But this part is all about the facts and the scientific information that he got on regarding testosterones, excitotoxins, the food we eat, and the food culture as a whole. And then we even get into potentially why they are attacking our physical bodies so much with the things we ingest. So definitely go take a listen to part 1, but this is part 2. So here it is, and I hope you enjoy the show. Joe, as you alluded to, many times there's maybe more of a conspiratorial aspect involved when talking about the food that we ingest, and how it actually plays into the greater cultural issues that we're facing in regards to the demasculinity of men and the collapse of the family, and the different, like the transgender movements and things like that. Obviously, I'm extrapolating it quite largely into more of a general term, but a lot of these things stem from the fall in testosterone that we see in men. So, and your studies have kind of led you to say, well, that's really largely because of the food that we ingest.
Yes, so what's happening, Sam? Thanks for having me back on the program. What's happening in the United States in particular? I'll give you one example. During the expose research that we did for the book Timebomb, I made some startling discoveries. Now, some of this information has been out there percolating, so it wasn't like I was the very first one that ever discovered what a xenoestrogen is, obviously. But trying to connect it to mainstream America, being another voice to say, look, guys, this is not fringe. This is absolutely real, and it's absolutely happening. My co-author, Allie Anderson, is a certified private investigator. So I can give her information to go research, and she can look through the smokescreen and find what is legit from what is Facebook meme from what not. Xenoestrogens, I'll give you one example of how our physiology is being attacked and changed in this country, and how it's desperately affecting young people in particular, because they drink so much out of plastic bottles and stuff. But what is this term xenoestrogen? There are ingredients that are used, chemicals, that are used in the production of almost all of the plastics in the United States. So every time plastic manufacturers are making bottles, it's plates, it's plastic spoons, it's little spatulas that you scoop peanut butter out of the jar with. It's DVD cases. It's everything and anything. K-cups that you drink from every morning when you make your coffee. Almost all of the plastics in this country are manufactured using chemicals like bisphenol A and phthalates. Do you remember a few years ago when this big thing broke out all over the news, BPA free? We're going BPA free, and companies were boycotting BPA and sticking labels on stuff that said BPA free. It's because people started to raise a stink about this, and so they wanted to do the right thing, or at least with some of these companies, create the illusion they were doing the right thing by labeling their products BPA free. So, plastic drinking bottles and stuff like this. The problem is that's only one ingredient. It just happens to be the one that's popularly labeled as BPA free and so forth. But there's many other chemicals, and phthalates is one that's used in almost everything. What they do is they produce a side effect, a synthetic estrogen, that when consumed invades the body, and literally creates a more powerful response than the estrogen that like a female body actually produces on its own. Whether you're male or female, you're ingesting these synthetic estrogens, and they're tinkering with your testosterone. So men, for example, do I know about this from personal experience? Absolutely. One of the side effects as I was developing chronic fatigue, brain fog, inability to function, inability to remember anything, and I was slowing, and my hormones were getting more and more out of whack. I found out, finally, I had a blood test done, revealed that my testosterone was down to 219. Now, I don't know if you know what that means. A lot of people, they don't know where their testosterone should set. They don't know what numbers mean anything, so I'll just tell you.
Of course I know what it means because I'm the host, but so everyone who doesn't, just go ahead and tell them.
Right, well, you know everything, Sam. It depends on who you talk to. A traditional Western medical doctor, they feel like 500 is normal, and maybe you start dipping down to like 400. You're starting to get low. If you go to a clinic where people are athletes and they're lifting weights and they're performing cage fighters and runners and things like this, they want to see a man my age at about 1600 being the low end and maybe higher than that. Wow. I've had a lot of really smart people tell me they're happy with 1100, but beyond that it becomes gratuitous and not necessary, and then with like a low cap of being about 700. So the point is 219. Yeah. 219 is like horrifically low. Yeah. Also, you need to understand, Sam, in case you don't already, which we just covered, you do know everything, that this generation only has a third of the testosterone that our grandfathers did. So they're also rewriting what is the national average. And I can give you examples of this. I mean, we can, however far you want to go, we can unpack this. But if you trust me, the point is a third of the testosterone that our grandfathers had. Now, why does that matter? Why does it make any difference? These xenoestrogens, when these plastics are manufactured, these chemicals are still gassing out. So these xenoestrogens are in the plastic bottles that we're drinking from. These K-cups, we're getting exposures. Every time you run a bowl through the dishwasher, you're exposing everything else to these xenoestrogens. And when you consume them, they tinker with your hormones. A man, to feel normal, needs no less than about 500 for his total testosterone count. Just to feel normal, to have the kind of energy that gets him up and keeps him rational and doesn't impact his hormones in a desperate way. Many of the side effects of low testosterone, you look at how angry people are and how frustrated they are. Side effects of low testosterone, things like rage, depression, just a ton of sorrow, feelings of despair, foreboding sense that tomorrow is not worth getting out of bed for. Seriously. Anxiety, hot sweats, they're just nervous and shifty. Well, I was nervous forever. I really did. One of the reasons I think my health continued to collapse was because I was just constantly, I had faith in Jesus, and I kept saying, Lord, I'm a believer. All of my logic tells me that I have a good life. My children are healthy. I have opportunity in life. Why do I have these feelings of despair at times? They did not rest with my logic. So my head knowledge was different from what I was feeling. And now they know. The world's leading holistic doctors and scientists have made this amazing connection called the gut-brain connection. If your gut is off and your hormones are off, you'll have these feelings of despair and foreboding sense of doom. So we ask ourselves, getting into the spiritual, Sam, as a church or as parents raising children, and we look at little baby boys now. They get their dose of xenoestrogens through the plastic lining in their diapers now, and we wonder that by the time they're in junior high, why they're maybe confused about what gender they identify with. Is this making sense? Yeah. Everything that is, and it's not specific to male. It's not exclusive to male either. The same xenoestrogens are goofing with women like crazy. It's throwing their thyroid and their whole entire hormonal systems out of whack. Feelings of despair, feelings of anxiety, the continued depletion of their immune systems. And again, once the gut is compromised, it allows for this onslaught of autoimmune disease types. So xenoestrogens, that's just one example of how I believe our children and our species as human beings right now is under complete assault from tons and tons of stuff in our environment. And then we ask the Lord, Sam, we go to prayer. We want discernment. We're asking him, during these times of big decision making. We're going to build a church. Maybe we're to move to Florida. Maybe I should be a missionary. Maybe I should put my son through this college or not. And we're asking him for discernment, and yet the things that we're ingesting every day, every time we drink a soda, every time we go to the Chinese food restaurant, every time we eat out of a plastic bowl, even if it's a salad and we think we've done the right thing, we're tinkering with our own physiology. And then we ask the Lord for discernment when we're praying. And I ask people listening to this program, is it possible that some of the stuff we write off as a gut feeling, or I think what God is trying to tell me because I feel this way about it consistently, could it be, if we're tinkering with our physiology and our psychology through the things that we're eating and drinking, could it be that we're also tinkering with our ability to discern what God is trying to tell us in spiritual matters?
Yeah, that mentality reflects Dr. Michael Lake actually wrote a book on health and what you should eat, and he tells a story in the beginning about how he was asking the Lord to bless his food, and he got kind of a message from God saying, how can I bless this food when it's nothing but, I forget the actual words he uses, but I'm going to paraphrase and say nothing but garbage that you're eating.
Garbage.
It's not good for you. And how can I bless that? And how can you truly follow me if you're not even willing to be disciplined enough to take care of the temple, your own body that I have given you? So that definitely reflects that same mentality. So that's why it's so important to talk about this type of thing. So kind of to transition to another big point in your book, which is the excitotoxins, which you mentioned. Can you expand more on what that is and the implications they have?
Yes. So excitotoxins are in a ton of the foods we eat. They're used as a sweetener, but they're often not labeled things like saccharin or MSG. But all of these artificial sweeteners are what's called excitotoxins, and they get their name because they literally stimulate the pleasure centers of the brain unto death. Meaning that the pleasure centers of your brain, when you eat this stuff or drink this stuff that have these excitotoxins in them, these artificial sweetener, they're put in there so that your brain receives these signals of being rewarded and satisfied. You like the taste. You get addicted to a specific drink at a specific time of the day. They're also highly addicting, by the way, and we're gonna connect them to some of the biggest disasters in our health right now, from your gut to Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's, a ton of stuff. But diet sodas, artificial sweeteners, and let me tell you how wild this stuff runs rampant. Even if you go to a restaurant and you think that you're making the good decision because you're going to have a salmon and a broccoli, and you're not going to have bread, you're just only going to do the right thing. If they put a honey Dijon or a bourbon this or that or any kind of a sauce on there whatsoever, if you're not watching the label, there's a very, I don't want to put a number on it. I don't want to say 90% chance, but there is a very strong chance that what was being used from the manufacturer has MSG, monosodium glutamate, or one of these other saccharin, aspartame, this type of an artificial sweetener. They're using them in foods now, even meat patties. Hey, hold the bun, hold the ketchup. I'm just going to do like a lettuce wrap and a meat. And in the ground beef itself, they've added salts, they've added excitotoxins. So when you ingest them,
so real quick, an excitotoxin is just a sweetener, essentially?
No, the sweeteners, well, essentially, yes. The artificial sweeteners are designed to give you this sense of reward.
Okay, and that's what...
Yes, they tell the tongue, they tell the receptor, the pleasure centers of the brain and the senses groups like smell and taste, that you're receiving a more bold, a more boisterous, a more rewarding experience than you actually are.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep, got it. I just want to
some of those signature flavors that you've just grown to love are things like these sauces that are used, manufacturing sauces and barbecue sauce or whatever, and they stimulate the pleasure centers of the brain, and they continue to fire. They continue to fire 6 to 8 hours after you stop consuming them, literally damaging the cells that stimulate the pleasure centers of the brain. That's why they call them excitotoxins. They are stimulating unto death. Now, you have millions of them, but imagine every exposure accumulatively over time, what that does, right, Sam? If you were drinking, let's say, a diet soda every day, after watching a program like this, wouldn't you start to think, I wonder if I should take this seriously, or maybe I should kick the can down the road. I love my diet pop, And he did say overtime exposures. Maybe it's not a big deal. Let me read something to you that's shocking. Medical professor at the Parker University in Dallas, Texas, Dr. Edward Brown stated about MSG, monosodium glutamate. He says, when we eat foods laced with MSG or diet drinks sweetened with NutraSweet, the body is flooded with these excitatory neurotransmitter substances to a level 5 to 20 times greater than normal present within the blood. This neurotransmitter excess can cause repetitive firing of neurons, and when it continues without rest, neurons can eventually fatigue and die. There is growing evidence that these artificial food additives accelerate neurodegeneration in the individuals with a genetic predisposition to conditions such as Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, and dementia.
Wow.
Now, he continues, because these substances readily pass the placental barrier from mother to fetus, there is also speculation now that MSG and NutraSweet have contributed towards the dramatic increase in attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD.
Wow.
So you can't even be pregnant and eat and drink a lot of the stuff that's out there on the market without exposing your fetus now to these excitotoxins, which again, we just litigated a whole list of mental neurological disorders that are a side effect to overtime exposures to excitotoxins. I have a dear friend of mine. She works at SkyWatchTV, and I trust her completely. I've known her for about 8 years. And I did not ask her the specifics about this, but I mentioned this on the Hagman report. One of her friends passed away with a terminal brain tumor. And she somehow was informed by the family that they had done an autopsy and a culture to the tumor materials that were in her brain when she passed away. I did not want to probe because it was very sensitive and she was very upset, and I've never gone back because I've not wanted to raise this issue, and I don't think she's watching this program. But she informed me that they had told her that something like 77%, 73 or 77, it was in the 70% of the material cultured was aspartame.
Wow.
So you make of that what you want. I trust her completely. I trust that the family would not disclose that to her if they didn't have reasons to believe that that was real. Obviously, with stuff like that, they want to know what the material is. Now, I don't, that particular story, I don't even need to hedge what I just said or hang it on that hill there. I was just using that as another example of how this stuff can reach out and affect people right around us. There's another more immediate threat to your health that these excitotoxins create. In your gut, you can eventually develop an unhealthy overgrowth of a bacteria called Helicobacter HP pylori. So in your guts, Sam, right now, you would be frightened probably to learn that you have a certain amount of E. coli and some other things. It'd be very deadly if they weren't in your intestines. If that's why they say, you know, if you end up with a gunshot or something, half the time it's not even the things that the bullet whipped around and hit. If it misses major organs but hits your intestines, one of the reasons you would more likely die, if anything, is because of the infection, to having fecal materials, shooting around inside your body. You need a certain amount of healthy bacteria in your guts to be able to break down food, break down the particles, kind of unpack them so your body can receive all of the nuanced vitamins and stuff. But if you get an overgrowth of a negative bacteria that works against digestion, like Helicobacter HP pylori, you'll end up with all these digestive issues. And it's one of the leading reasons behind people that suffer from GERD or acid reflux, because their body can't get ahead of the HP pylori and actually break down food healthfully. So it creates too much stomach acid, which is, by the way, not too much stomach acid, which is why a traditional doctor will want to put you on pump inhibitors like Prilosec or Tagamet. The problem is actually the opposite, and I know that this is difficult for people to wrap their heads around, but the stomach needs to produce more, but a more potent, more effective stomach acid. So, for example, if you were to drink like 2 tablespoons of Bragg's organic apple cider vinegar 20 minutes before you eat a meal, you'd probably notice a staggering reduction in acid reflux because your body finally has enough acid in there to break the food down more efficiently, if that makes sense. Helicobacter pylori feed like rocket fuel on artificial sweeteners. So if you're having digestive issues and you've gleaned anything from this program, please stop drinking diet pops and pay very close attention to foods with MSG. Now, one of the games that's being played is now food corporations are figuring out that people are avoiding things like MSG, saccharin, and aspartame. So now they're hiding these things under phrases like natural flavors or spice. So this is one of the reasons in Timebomb we deal with the label game.
Mm-hmm.
We're literally walking you through the smokescreen. A lot of people just get overwhelmed, Sam. They go online. They're just, oh, my goodness. They're suspicious that their kids aren't eating right.
Yeah.
Maybe they think they're getting exposures to chemicals, but they have no idea where to begin.
Mm-hmm.
No idea.
Well, let's get to the point on how we help people navigate this food culture that we're talking about. But I do want to ask one question going back to the chemical side of things. Is I know that there's a blood-brain barrier that kind of prevents harmful things from getting to our brain to hurt it and damage it. So how does that play into what we ingest affecting our brain?
Right. So the brain has this amazing blood-brain barrier that God put there to keep you safe, right? So if you take like for example, like an illegal narcotic, an overdose, and you pass out, the brain is still in the background, moving the heart and continuing the respiratory system. You're doing this on what you and I would just layman, we would call it like autopilot. You're not having to think cognitively, I've got to breathe, I've got to keep my heart beating. This is all happening because your brain is keeping you alive, essentially. The excitotoxins, very few things will cross over the blood-brain barrier. It's like a shield that God put in place so that it could defend itself while then carry out all these other heal cycles. Even if you were to OD on drugs, your brain is still trying to pull you out of that desperate emergency. Make sense?
Yeah.
These excitotoxins cross right over that and stimulate the pleasure centers of the brain. It just busts right through the blood-brain barrier and begins to have its way with all of your sensory perceptions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah,
that's the hazard that leads to the dementia and the Alzheimer's and the things that we've discussed previously.
Right. All right. That's a great explanation. So I thank you for that. So let's get back into the culture, the food culture, and how to navigate it in a godly way, because we've all been at the grocery store and certain things catch our eye. I think that's the first step, is to identify that they're trying to sell you something, and that's their main priority. Most of them could care less about the health behind it, and they put fancy labels on it to catch your eye and entice you to eat the bad things. But it can be so overwhelming when you look at the back of a product and there's tons and tons of different words. Some of them you can't even read. And to know what we're supposed to buy, what we're supposed to put in ourselves, because the enemy, Satan, has made so many bad options, it's hard to find that one or two good options. So how do we do that? What's the steps?
So in a program like this, let's just keep it really simple. Having said that, in the book Timebomb, we do litigate the long version. Mm-hmm. So you're going to get into specific ingredients to avoid, how they repackage labels. And what's really cool with Timebomb is right now, as these huge food corporations are figuring out that people are abandoning in droves certain ingredients, they're repackaging them to read differently, like we talked about with MSG. Now they're calling it spice or natural flavors, right?
Right.
You'll have a food or like an herbal tea package to appeal to health people even. And it'll have all the green colors of the field and trees, and it's to stimulate the idea that, hey, to pull you in and identify a product as healthy, and it appears as though it's natural. They'll even use words like natural, right? But when you flip it over, it will say things like orange peel, spice, cinnamon, and natural flavors. Natural because it's natural, right? But there's a game going on. And what that really should read is natural flavors. Let's see, I said it like on the Jim Baker show. I made it up on the spot. I'm going to try to remember it. It's pretty good. But natural flavors ought to read something synthetic that's probably really, really bad for you, that is designed to taste like something natural used to, or something like that. But
yeah,
it's a total game, right? So it cannot, in a program like this, I cannot walk the listener through the things that they need to do this long term because they're going to continue to change the way that words work to trick you and so forth. So we deal with that. We deal with that in Timebomb. How to kind of think less about memorize. Like Sam, you're never going to memorize 80,000 words that they've put out there with ingredients, right? But let me give you one tip, and this will start to make sense, I hope, to the listener. If you're out grocery shopping, this one concept alone will save you a ton of exposures to things that are nefarious, that are destroying your body. When you go out grocery shopping, if you pick up an item and you flip it around and you're reading the label, and the list of ingredients in that product is this long, I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
And you can't pronounce most of the words, it's not good for you. It's got a lot of stuff in it that you don't want in your body.
Right.
Now, a lot of people will go to the grocery store and they'll say, oh, that's a great tidbit. And they'll start picking things up and they'll start to realize that almost all of the labels read that way. Lots of ingredients, lots of them they can't pronounce. And they'll start to think, well, everything is labeled like this. Bingo. That is how much of the stuff that's in our grocery stores is really bad at this point, that you need to avoid to avoid the exposures of the chemicals, the pesticides, the preservatives, the artificial dyes, all of that stuff. So what that's going to do is it's going to drive you while you're out grocery shopping to things that have simplified ingredients that are just what they are. Carrots. Turn a bag over. Black beans. Make sense?
Yeah.
What does that do? That puts you in a position where nothing is a commodity now. Nothing is easy. Nothing is what we've kind of grown to expect in terms of fast food prep. Mm-hmm. See, our culture, Sam, we've conditioned ourselves that everything has to be convenient. I give this example with the K-Cups, for example. We've all gotten, and I say we because this took me a while too. I had to get used to the K-Cup. I was resistant at first because I was used to my normal brew, right? Back when I got really, really sick, I was popping K-Cups because they were faster. And I remember at the time even thinking, they don't give me the same bold, like real cup of coffee taste, but they're fast. And then I just got used to what they tasted like. So that became the norm. You pop a thing in, you hit the thing, you go, and 2 minutes later you got coffee. What happened was I got to a point where after I started realizing that these could be creating exposures to xenoestrogens, and I started learning about ingredients like bisphenol A and phthalates and all this other stuff, I decided to go back to a percolator. And I remember at first thinking, what a pain that you got to hand grind these beans and then stick them in a stainless steel percolator and then you plug it in and it takes like 6-7 minutes for your coffee. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now go back to, pre-electrical industry. Or pre-automatic grinder, to a guy who has to hand grind his beans and he's roasting it over open flame. He would think, oh my goodness, you have an automatic electric percolator? You got to be kidding me. That's like cheating the system. I can have fresh coffee all I want with the electric grinder and this other thing like in 7 minutes. Are you kidding? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really obvious example of how, like, over time, and I'm not stating anything that every listener doesn't get it. We have gone completely bananas in this country in particular with fast commodity. The problem is almost all of that industry, if it's super fast, it's probably really, really bad for you. What that's going to do, adjusting your perception of food, where you might be getting exposures, and how they're gaming folks, will drive you back to an era where you have to think a little bit now. You have to do cooking for yourself again. You actually have to think about what you're going to make from ingredients that you bought individually instead of having, a soup, for example, out of a can that's already chopped and done and so forth, and all you got to do is heat it up. Mm-hmm. Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even in your book, you talk about how back almost, maybe 70 years ago, the wife was spending 44 hours in the kitchen a week to prepare food for people, and now it's under 10 hours preparing food, and even for millennials it might be 20 minutes to prepare food because most of them don't even know how to cook. And
that's right.
I think one of your strongest points in the book is what you're alluding to in this situation is one of the most a quote you had is one of the most dangerous ingredients is our complacency towards our food and our lazy attitude when it comes to things like that. And I think that's a super important point to touch on is you gotta stop being lazy. You have to learn how to cook and really remember what you're supposed to ingest to give your body what it needs to fight off harmful diseases that might come along.
Right.
And so would you say that it's almost essential to, this is kind of a leading question, so I'll try to rephrase it to not be a leading question. Do you support the idea of going to like local markets and to find good local area farms? And is that how we're supposed to switch over? Maybe just abandon the commercial grocery store completely?
So I'm glad that you asked me that question. I'm a huge fan of local farmers markets, locally raised meats, fresh produce from your neighbor. I'm a huge fan of that, but I don't want to be exclusive to those people that just said, oh my goodness, but I live in New York. What am I supposed to do? I'm a big city. There's nothing. Give me a break. I guess I have to just eat toxins. The thing about Timebomb is we do deal with that. And there are things that even in your standard big box grocery stores, if you're willing to cook your own foods, that you still can create whole cloth from ingredients that are going to be way better for you than the stuff that's already prepackaged. If it's a meal that's already done up for you, I could almost guarantee you in this country it's got some link to ingredients that are causing cancer or other various diseases. And so yes, I'm a huge fan of the local markets and things like that, fresh farmers markets, local fish, things like that. And we're in the Midwest. I'm very blessed. I have different ways of getting food that's much, much cleaner for me. Randy Conway, my dear friend, knows a butcher, for example. We get a lot of meats from Mount Vernon, places that aren't too far from here. But if you're not in that position, I don't want you to think that it's hopeless, because even if you had to shop at a big box grocery store, there are lots of things you can do, like the example that I just provided you with, that will help you clean up your food so that you can avoid a lot of these these toxic exposures to things that are lending itself to so much disease. What's going to happen, Sam? I can honestly, we do hear this. People think I already have a life that is at maximum. I raise my children. I pastor a church. whatever. I don't have time to cook. I really don't. And I will tell you, Sam, we do find time for the things that we prioritize. It is only because we've built our lives around how convenient our terrible food system is for us that we have all of this extra time to throw at things like ministry and family and whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly, it's only because we've allowed this to happen. So yes, right now, if you look at your life the way it's designed right now, you probably don't have time to cook a meal. But that's got to be where it starts. It's got to be, because nothing that's pre-prepped, for the most part, is going to be good for your body. It's not going to be good for your kids. You also have to do this for yourself. Sam, when I first started getting better and I started going the holistic approach to healing my gut from the inside out, and then how that began to domino the autoimmune diseases that I struggled with for so long, putting into remission the things like painful bladder syndrome, the chronic prostatitis and prostatitis, and all the other digestive issues, the acid reflux. It is amazing the quality of life I have now based on the steps that I have followed in the Timebomb book, if that makes sense. And then helping others. I have two individuals that work for me here at SkyWatch. One has put multiple sclerosis into complete remission through diet. You know who she is. I just won't name names because she may not want that to be public. And then I have another individual here that works in the warehouse that you wouldn't know, who put her lupus into remission.
Wow.
Through gut care and doing this the natural way. And that's the other part that Timebomb deals with. How to find. What is the difference between a holistic doctor and a naturopathic doctor versus a chiropractor that also knows herbalism? What is the deal, right? We identify the different forms of care, the alternative medicine care, and how to find the right one for where you live and what your expectations are. And we deal with things. I'll give you a few examples if you want. If you're out there listening to this program and you want to, do we have time?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. If you're out there listening to this program and you want to know, okay, give me just a few examples of the things. You've talked a lot about gut care, autoimmune disease, how you can battle this stuff back with the foods that you're eating. Where would I begin? Bone broth. Now, you can buy this in a powder. Most natural health stores will have this. It is very good for you. You can also make your own. I'm in a position where I can get shoulder bones, from a butcher who's throwing them away. Grass-fed cows that they're butchering, they throw these shoulder bones away because there's no meat on them, and they're big and they're weird and nobody uses them for anything, so they throw them in the garbage. I get a bag of those, it'll last me months. I just freeze them. And what I do is I put them in a pressure cooker with a couple of tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, Bragg's Organic, and let's say 8 or 10 cups of water, depending on the bone size. A bigger bone, you can fill it to the top. And you pressure cook that for about 90 minutes. And out of it, the liquid is clear when you hit start. When you pull the lid off, it's this deeply yellow. Looks just like bone. Well, it looks just like chicken broth that you buy at the store. Deeply yellowed broth filled with collagen. The collagen is going to line your intestines. It's going to promote healing. Super nutritious. Repairs the gut lining. You get a lot of bone marrow that way as well too. It's really good for you. There's another thing. People that need relief for digestive issues that are using any kind of a commercial fiber, I would challenge you to take a second look. I took for years orange flavored fiber and had no idea why it took more and more of it over time and why I still struggled with digestive issues and couldn't find relief. Most of that stuff has saccharin or aspartame in it. Defer back to my comments about H. pylori bacteria overgrowth.
Right.
So here you are, you're taking a fiber, and yet at the same time, there's all these artificial sweeteners in there to make you think that it's orange juice or something like that. You can buy at most organic stores like Lucky's or Mama Jean's or just whatever your state has for natural type health food stores and stuff will have bulk psyllium husks, and that's spelled with a P, P-S-Y, L-L-I-U-M husks, psyllium husks. There's a plant, usually in India, called Plantago ovata, and it's the seed from that plant. It's a very effective form of fiber that will also help kind of brush and clean the intestines so you don't develop what's called inflamed bowel disease, which is where things get stuck to the lining of the intestines. It's like little brooms. It's in there. It'll clean the intestines. It will help heal the intestines. It provides some relief to the hard work that your intestines are doing trying to push food out.
Yeah.
It's non-addictive. That's the other thing.
Uh-huh.
Non-addictive, so you don't have to keep taking more and more and more and more and more over time.
Right. It's almost like if you feed your body what it needs, God has designed it to take control of any diseases that you might come across in the world. It's almost like that it was designed that way for our body to handle these sorts of things. So I think like the designer, he might have known what he was doing. Yeah, he might have had an idea that if we just take care of the gift that he's given us, then we can handle the things. And I think that's ultimately the point of this show, is if you take care of the temple you're given, then it's going to be okay. And so we talked a lot about the facts of what is happening in our culture. So I kind of want to transition to more of an idea based question, and kind of this is kind of how we'll end it. Why is this such a huge movement to introduce these negative aspects into our food that's hurting our body? And obviously this is an opinion question. Sure. So what are they trying to push us to? And I guess end it with the positivity of what we're doing to stop it. There are some that believe it is nefarious, that at the core of all of this, that the FDA is maybe either turning a blind eye to or a part of, or whatever. There's a lack of regulation, that this is being done on purpose, that the government of the world want to depopulate everything, and so they're killing us through the food stream. Or they're inflicting disease. This is all part. You hear a lot about this with vaccines. These conversations about where have doctors that have come up with various cures or linked a certain disease to a vaccine, where did they go, and are they still alive, and what happened to them? There are those that believe it is nefarious at the core, that this is an intentional effort to destroy you. Then there are those that just believe it's simply lack of manpower, that the FDA they care, but they just can't. I mean, we're getting essentially emotionally waterboarded with the number of stuff coming in from overseas. Mm-hmm. 22,000. Have you seen those huge cargo bins? Right. Those metal, a day.
inside detailing thousands upon thousands of individual items every single day. No possible way that you could ever have enough manpower to go through every little thing and then do independent auditing of every little chemical and whatever. So there are those that believe it's just a matter of total lack of ability to filter and process and whatever. And then there's also people that believe that the FDA is doing a great job. It just so happens to be that they allow for a lot of chemicals that they ignorantly don't know are linked to various myriads of diseases and stuff. Does that make sense? Like if they knew differently, they would regulate it better.
Yeah.
Now, depending on where you fall in that aisle, way over here being it's totally nefarious, and maybe way over here where it's accidental or unintentional. I don't buy the accidental, unintentional part of it. I'm somewhere in the middle. I believe that there are those factions that at a minimum take pleasure in the decimation of God's creation. I take deep pleasure in seeing it erode and become what it is. The degenerative things now that we're passing on to our children through the things that we've eaten that have damaged their DNA and what they've done already to their bodies that they may pass along. We know this from animal testing, that every generation of lineage that eats genetically modified organisms passes on deteriorative degeneration to the physiology of that species. We already know this is happening, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I believe that no matter where you fall on that aisle of discussion, the reality net worth is the same. It is happening. And that's not to scapegoat your question. I tend to believe that it is a huge amount of corporate greed, that the things that stimulate the pleasure centers of your mind that create addiction, we already know they do this with cigarettes. They make them as highly addicting as they can because it guarantees market share. When you drink a soda, and you do it for a year, and then you find after a year that you almost feel naked without that soda in your hand at 3 o'clock when you're driving home from work, and that's about when you do. There's something more to it than just a habit or a routine. There's something physiologically and chemically that's happening there. And I think that it just so happens to be that these huge food conglomerates don't care about you. They don't care about your children. They don't care about your children's offspring. They don't care. They care about market share. So if they have to addict you, they don't care what it's doing to your body. And so it's super cheap, super addictive. They don't care. Huge, massive amounts of money. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of these, corporations also have the back pockets of many politicians that have to do with how the laws around food get written and regulated. But here's the deal. Take that whole commentary that I just provided and set it off to the side. Here's the point. Timebomb is the expose that shows you exactly how you can just decide not to participate in that whole game. There are going to be micro exposures as long as you're on this planet. We have airplanes flying over the top. We touch plastic things. You drive a vehicle and you're behind another vehicle. You might be ingesting microparticles of the very brake dust that comes off of the vehicle in front of you. Metals that are building up in your prostate, and you don't even realize this is happening because you eat clean. There's things you can do to detox that. But the point is you have to be very proactive. You have to be, Sam. You can't elect not to participate in this because, as I said at the front end of the first program, 80% now, our world's leading holistic doctors and scientists believe that 80% of Americans now are being affected by leaky gut syndrome, which is allowing their immune systems to then lay down and allow for things like cancer, chronic illness, chronic fatigue, other autoimmune diseases. We're past that generation where we lived agriculturally. This is the battle. Whether you like it, whether it makes you uncomfortable, whether you know where to begin, whether you're threatened by it. And so that is what Timebomb is trying to do. It's an urgent expose that brings you the hopeful steps that you really can do to both heal your gut, repair your physiology, where to go for natural treatment, and how to avoid these toxic ingredients that we're being exposed to. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So no matter where you are on that whole spectrum of, is it nefarious? Is it the FDA? What Timebomb is here to help you focus on how you can spend your energy making a healthier way for you and your kids.
Mm-hmm. That's a good answer to that. I definitely fall more towards the conspiratorial aspect of it for sure, but I think that, like you said, you kind of put it aside to say it is happening. That's what's going on. Either way, it's a spiritual battle. It's an aspect of the larger spiritual battle that we need to understand. Right. They're pushing ideas like immediate gratification. They're pushing ideas like the demasculinity of man in the way they're constructing this food. So ultimately, it's a spiritual battle. You can even go back to Genesis 6 when it talks about the destruction of our DNA and how they're trying to do the same exact thing. That's a whole nother big conversation that we won't get into now, but I know a lot of people are thinking that, so I wanted to say it because it's definitely a part of this spiritual battle, and that's what this show is all about. It's about identifying the different aspects of this spiritual battle. So, Mr. Horn, where can people find the book? Where can they support you? And do you have anything else coming up in the future?
I do have a work I'm not ready to reveal yet.
Okay.
Hopefully later this year. Right now, if they want to get a copy of Timebomb, we have a special happening at SkyWatchTVstore.com where you get Timebomb, the companion DVD, which has off-the-record interviews with a lot of the doctors that have helped me. They're talking about how to create superior physiology, how to reverse things like leaky gut syndrome, how to supplement properly. We didn't even get into supplements, but there's a whole game there. Ways to avoid dangerous supplements that are being passed off as things like calcium that build up in your body and create problems for you. There's a proper way to supplement using whole food supplements. Just a lot of stuff like that in the book and in the DVD. The DVD is 5 hours and 37 minutes. And you also receive a book called Eat This and Live for Kids. It's I wish I had a copy. I would have flipped it around for you, but it's a guidebook to how to get parents tips and tricks to introducing healthy food options for their kids so that it's a fun thing, introducing food to kids so it's not this negative thing. Hey, we're not going to eat chips anymore because mommy's decided you're going to eat broccoli. Kind of make that funner, happy little things. And then finally, trying to remember what's in the package, the Dead Pets Don't Lie book, which we didn't even get into, and the Dead Pets Don't Lie expose DVD, which basically looks at the expose we've done for Timebomb through the lens of how it affects our pets. There is a ton of unbelievable stuff happening with our pet food that's leading to all kinds of breed damage. There's breeds of dogs that are in big trouble. And it's really scary when you think about what's in the grocery store that you're bringing home in bags that are supposed to be healthy pet food. And then you find out that it is some very nefarious stuff going on. So, yeah, it's something for the whole family.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, and I'm sorry, it's that whole value is $140 value for your donation of $30 at SkyWatchTVstore.com. Wow.
That's definitely a great deal. Guys, you definitely have to go check that out. Everything over on the SkyWatch channel is high quality content. They do have a TV station, as we talked about earlier, it puts out a lot of good truth, like you heard in this episode, or these two episodes. Mr. Horn, thank you so much for coming on the Sharpening Report. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
It's a pleasure. Guys, you are always asking, what can we do when we come across different topics? What can we do to try to change our world and change our culture? Well, it starts with things like this. It starts like changing your own life. It starts by changing in your own local area. Take control of what you eat. That is a part of this larger spiritual battle that we are a part of, and if we can take control of that aspect of our spiritual warfare, it's going to start to seep into other aspects of our larger culture that we're all looking to change and we're all looking to bring back to God. So this is what this topic was about. Stop being lazy and change it and do what's right. Take care of your temple. Guys, I'm not going to ask you to like, subscribe, or share, but I appreciate it if you do. This is it. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope they have a great week. It's
that whole thing about growing up and my father, that whole thing about Sky, like nobody's ever heard that.
Yeah.
They just think I'm the son, I'm along for the ride. I've been a fan of SkyWatch from the beginning, but it was very much a wearing down.
No, well here is a fundamental foundation that's the Sharpening Report. What you go through and who you are and the path that you've taken has led you to the point that you've created the work or the reason that you're on the Sharpening Report. And so I want to dive into that, to hear where you come from, to see what God has put you through and molded you and constructed you to be the person who is now sitting on this show talking about some sort of topic that's passionate to you. And so I like to know about that. In this world, the guests, especially the leaders on the fringe community, they're figureheads on a screen, and no one knows that they're people. And
right.
So my goal is to bring you on as a guest and have you leave as a person. It's kind of corny, but
no, it's wonderful.